The shiny bell above the door made a sound like a tiny wind chime when the door opened. Ding! It was clear and pretty, like something you'd hear in a fairy tale. Keanu Reeves opened the door and held it for his friend, Clara Monroe. Cold air from the street blew inside for just a moment. They both stepped into the fancy jewelry store. The store was called the Diamond Boutique, and it looked like a castle made of sparkles. Golden lights hung from the ceiling. The carpet was soft like a cloud. Glass boxes floated everywhere, showing off sparkling jewels. Everything looked expensive. The workers wore black gloves, and the shoppers wore fancy clothes like queens and kings. But Keanu didn't look fancy. He wore a gray hoodie with a few wrinkles, old boots that looked like they had walked many miles, and his hair was a little messy. His face was calm. Even though many people had seen him in movies, nobody in the store seemed to recognize him now. Clara wore a white dress. It was simple and soft, like something a painter might wear. Her gray hair was tied back in a small bun. She looked gentle, not like someone who was going to spend lots of money. They walked slowly and politely, but people in the store stared at them. Behind the front counter, a lady named Vanessa was talking. She stopped when she saw Keanu and Clara. Vanessa was around 30 years old, with bright red lipstick and a perfect smile, but her eyes looked like they were judging. She held a clipboard and looked at Keanu like he didn't belong. "Excuse me," Vanessa said, calling out across the shiny floor. "This store is for people who have appointments. Did someone send you here?" Keanu nodded politely. "We just want to look at the ruby jewelry," he said softly. Vanessa raised her eyebrows. "Rubies?" she said as she walked over. She looked at Keanu's old jeans and made a small sound with her mouth. "Tieske." "We don't have fake jewelry here," she said, like she was warning them. Clara looked toward a glass box. Inside was a beautiful red jewel shaped like a thorny flower. Vanessa quickly stepped in front of it, blocking the view. "That one's for real customers," Vanessa said. "I'm sure you understand." Some of the shoppers nearby started to whisper. One woman in shiny high heels leaned toward her friend and said, "Did they just walk in from the street?" Another younger man snickered and said, "They look like they're going to steal something." Keanu didn't say a word. He just looked around, calmly, like none of it surprised him. Clara gently touched Keanu's arm, trying to say, "Maybe we should go." But Keanu smiled and shook his head. "Let's stay a little longer," he said. Vanessa crossed her arms. "There's a shop 2 blocks away," she told them. "They sell fake stones. Much more your style. You might find something for less than 1,000. Keanu looked at her kindly. "What if we're looking for something priceless?" Vanessa laughed a cold laugh. "Oh, sweetie," she said. "You've already found it. This moment you'll never forget." She didn't know how true that was. The music in the store played softly again. The lights twinkled. But something had changed. Vanessa walked toward them slowly, like a queen walking toward people who didn't belong. She held her clipboard like it was a shield. She stopped in front of them and said in a sharp voice, "Do you have an appointment?" "What's your name?" Keanu shook his head. "No appointment. We just wanted to see some ruby jewelry." Vanessa gave a smile that wasn't nice. "Well, just so you know," she said, "our rubies start at $90,000. Keanu smiled a little. "Good to know." Vanessa didn't like how calm he was. She waved her fingers toward a small glass case. "This one," she said, pointing to a tiny ring, "is the cheapest. It's old, but some people like it for birthdays and such." Clara tried to get a closer look, but Vanessa stepped in front of her again. "Don't touch the glass," Vanessa said. "Your hands will make it dirty." Clara looked surprised. Keanu's jaw moved just a little. He was getting upset, but staying calm. Nearby, a young man in a dark blue blazer started recording with his phone. "Undercover broke people," he whispered, laughing. Keanu noticed. He always noticed. But he stayed quiet. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. He opened it and showed a drawing of a necklace. "We're looking for something like this," he said. "I drew it. For our anniversary." Vanessa didn't even look. "You design jewelry?" she asked. Keanu nodded. "For her." Vanessa gave a wide, mean smile. "How sweet. But custom pieces like that start at $250,000. I'd hate for you to waste your time." She turned just enough to give a signal to the security guard nearby. She thought Keanu and Clara should leave. Keanu put the sketch away. "Time isn't wasted," he said, "when you learn what people are really like." Now Clara wasn't smiling either. Vanessa walked behind the counter again. A gold sign said, "Vanessa Blake, Senior Sales Executive." She tapped it with her finger like it meant something big. A young helper whispered to her. Vanessa didn't even turn her head and said, "Don't worry, just people pretending." Keanu heard it. So did Clara. Vanessa unlocked a glass box with a shiny key. But instead of showing the beautiful ruby Clara had liked, she took out a small necklace with a lumpy red heart. She put it on the counter. "Here," she said. "Simple and cute. Perfect for simpler people." Clara looked at it. "That's not the one I was looking at." Vanessa laughed. "Oh, that necklace? That's not for people like you." From the side, the young man in the blue blazer returned. This time, he brought two women. One took a photo of Keanu's shoes. "At least they're not from a garbage can," she joked. Vanessa didn't stop them. She smirked. "Let me guess," she said to Keanu. "You're one of those YouTubers trying to be funny, right? Pretending to be poor." Keanu didn't say anything. He looked at Clara, and his eyes were sorry, as if saying, "I didn't mean for this to happen." Clara shook her head slightly. "It's not your fault." Vanessa clapped her hands loudly. "Okay, I need to help real customers now." Then, she pulled out a small cleaning cloth from a drawer. Without asking, she tossed it toward Keanu's chest. It hit him softly and fell to the floor. "There's a smudge on the glass," Vanessa said coldly. "You were too close. Be helpful and wipe it before you go." Keanu looked down at the cloth. Slowly, quietly. Behind the glass, in a reflection, Vanessa could now see his eyes clearly. And for the first time, they didn't look calm. Vanessa turned around and looked at the couple. She smiled in a sugary sweet way, but her words felt sharp, like tiny pinches. "Okay," she said, "you can hold this little necklace," and she pointed at the tiny pendant, "if you can guess how much it costs. Whoever gets the closest guess wins one of our fancy chocolates." She was teasing, but not in a nice way. She was being mean, and everyone around seemed to enjoy it like it was a funny TV show. Clara, the quiet and kind woman, blinked once. "I don't need chocolate," she said in a calm and strong voice. Vanessa laughed and pretended to be surprised. "Oh right, I forgot. You're probably gluten-free." Some people nearby giggled. One lady with a big fancy purse leaned over to her friend and whispered, "This is better than Netflix." Then something big happened, something no one ever forgot. A server walked through the store. He was older and wore white gloves. He was carrying a shiny silver tray filled with tiny cups of espresso and sweet macarons for special guests in the private part of the store. As he walked past Vanessa, she quickly grabbed one of the espresso cups. Then, pretending it was an accident, she made herself trip a little. The hot brown coffee spilled all over Clara's pretty white dress. It splashed on her chest and stomach, leaving brown spots that looked like bruises on the soft fabric. Everyone gasped. Vanessa put her hand over her mouth, pretending to be sorry. "Oh no," she said, trying to sound worried but actually looking kind of happy. "I didn't see you standing so close." Keanu, Clara's friend, stepped forward. He didn't run. He didn't yell. But he moved quickly and stood in front of Clara like a strong wall. His eyes looked straight at Vanessa. He didn't blink. "You've made your point," Keanu said in a voice that wasn't soft anymore. It was calm but strong. Vanessa smiled in a fake way. "Of course, we'll pay for cleaning her dress. It looks like it's made of something delicate." Clara quietly took a napkin from the tray and dabbed her dress. She didn't say a word. Her fingers shook just a little, not because she was embarrassed, but because she was trying really hard not to get angry. The whole store had gone quiet now. It was the kind of quiet you hear just before a thunderstorm. Some people put down their phones. Others looked away, feeling guilty. Some just stared. Keanu looked at Vanessa again and said, "No. You've made your mistake." Vanessa's smile faded. She didn't know what he meant. But she would understand in exactly 2 minutes. The silence grew. Everyone could feel it. Clara stood still. Her dress was wet and stained. The white cloth now stuck to her skin in messy patches. Her face was red, not because she felt ashamed, but because she was very angry and trying hard to stay calm. Keanu looked at her and asked softly, "You okay?" She nodded. "Let's go." But Vanessa wasn't done being mean. "Oh, come on," she said with a fake smile. "It was just an accident. It's not the end of the world. Coffee stains are nothing compared to the prices here." She turned back to the crowd, hoping someone would laugh. But no one did. Even the man who had been recording everything on his phone stopped. He lowered his phone. Now he looked worried. Vanessa didn't notice. She was still acting like she was in a show. She reached behind the counter, grabbed a red velvet cloth, and threw it at Keanu's hands. "Here," she said with a smirk. "You can clean up the mess. Might as well be useful." Her voice was loud now. Mean. Not even pretending to be nice anymore. Keanu looked down at the cloth in his hands. Then, very slowly, he let it drop back on the glass counter. It landed with a soft thump, but somehow it felt like a loud clap of thunder. Clara started to step forward, but Keanu gently held up her hand. He was still protecting her. Then he looked up, not at Vanessa, but at a mirror on the wall above the main display. And there, behind the mirror, he saw a door that was open just a little. A man in a black suit stood behind it, watching everything. He stepped out. He was tall, with silver hair and kind but serious eyes. Everyone in the room seemed to recognize him, even before they saw his face clearly. Margot Delacroix, the founder and boss of the whole jewelry company. His name was on the store's sign. He didn't say anything at first. He just walked forward, slowly and calmly. His eyes stayed on Vanessa, like a teacher looking at a student who just got caught cheating. Vanessa stood up straight when she saw him. "Sir, I didn't know you were here." Margot raised his hand, and suddenly everyone went completely quiet. He looked at Vanessa and said, "Step away from Mr. Reeves." Vanessa's mouth opened in surprise. She looked at Keanu, then back at Margot. And then her eyes widened. She realized something. "No," she whispered. "That's him." Keanu looked at her, calm and steady. Not mad. Just done. Margot walked closer. For the first time since they walked in, Clara smiled. It was a small smile. Not mean. Just peaceful. Like someone who had finally been seen for who they were. Margot stood tall in his perfect suit. His hands were folded behind his back. He said again, this time a little colder, "Step away from Mr. Reeves." Vanessa blinked like someone waking up from a nap. "Mr. Reeves?" she said, confused. She looked at Keanu again, and suddenly she saw him differently. Not just some quiet man in old shoes, but someone important. Someone powerful. Margot stepped beside Keanu and gently put a hand on his shoulder. It was a kind gesture, but strong. It said, "This man matters." "I'm so sorry, Keanu," Margot said warmly. "I heard you might visit today. I wish someone had told me sooner." He turned to Clara. His voice was gentle. "Miss Monroe, the special piece you asked about is ready. Would you both come with me to the atelier room?" The room was so quiet now. Everyone could feel it. The way Margot spoke, it wasn't just polite. It was like he was welcoming royalty. Vanessa stuttered, "Sir, I didn't know it was him. I thought he looked." "I don't care what you thought," Margot snapped. "What matters is how you treated a guest." Then he looked at everyone in the room. People who had laughed. People who had whispered. People who had filmed. "Remember this moment," he said. "Because if you judge someone by their shoes today, you won't be invited to sit at their table tomorrow." The room was frozen. Phones went back into pockets. Eyes looked down. Margot nodded toward a side door. "This way, please." Keanu and Clara walked past Vanessa. She just stood there, not moving. Her clipboard shook in her hands. As Keanu passed, Vanessa whispered, "Mr. Reeves, I'm so sorry." Keanu stopped for just a second. He looked at her, not angry, not even sad, just disappointed. "You should treat everyone like they matter," he said softly, "before you find out who they are." Then he walked on. Clara followed. Her stained dress still shined in the light like silk. She didn't need to say anything. And Vanessa, who had once been the queen of the boutique, now stood all alone, surrounded by shiny jewels, but feeling like the cheapest thing in the room. The atelier room was calm and beautiful. The walls were smooth wood, and the lights were soft and warm. No noise. No judgment. Just peace. Margot led Keanu and Clara to the center, where a little black box sat on a stand under a glowing light. He turned to them and smiled. Not fake, not for show. Just real. "I'm so sorry again," he said. "What happened out there, that's not who we are." Keanu nodded. "It's the world. You just saw it clearly in the light." Clara touched Keanu's hand gently. Margot stepped back and pointed to a pedestal. "It's ready," he said. "Your design brought to life." Keanu walked carefully to the box, opened it, and even Margot, who had seen many beautiful things, was silent. Inside the box was a necklace that sparkled like something from a dream. At the center of the necklace was a ruby, a deep, bright red one from Burma. The ruby was perfect, untouched by a tool, but carved in a way that made it special. It had rough edges, kept on purpose, like showing the real truth. The ruby was held by a nest of platinum thorns, not to trap the stone, but to protect it. Small black diamonds were set into the curves of the thorns, and at first they were hard to see. But when the light hit them, they shined like tiny secrets. It wasn't flashy or showy. It was real, strong, and beautiful in a quiet way. Clara gasped softly, her hand touching her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. It wasn't just because the necklace was beautiful. It was because it was her design, made real. Every line of the metal, every choice of the stone, was something she had drawn herself, and now it was in her hands. Keanu gently picked up the necklace and turned toward her. He fastened it around her neck like he was putting a crown on a queen. There was silence in the room. Then Clara whispered, "You remembered every line I sketched." Keanu nodded and said, "You said rubies remind you of resilience, of surviving heat and pressure." Margot stepped forward, almost with awe. "We've worked with royalty," he said. "But I've never seen a design like this. It's art. It's love crystallized." He cleared his throat and continued, "And if you want, Mr. Reeves, we'll show a replica at next month's gala. But of course, the original belongs here." Keanu nodded. "The auction proceeds, everything, will go to the Pediatric Cancer Fund." Margot placed a hand over his chest. "Already arranged." He hesitated and then added, almost quietly, "Most clients come in wearing status. But you walked in with soul. That's rarer than any diamond we sell." Keanu didn't answer. He didn't have to. Outside that room, whispers had already started. People would talk, phones would buzz, apologies would come, but in here, only truth mattered. Clara turned toward the mirror. The ruby necklace glowed against her stained white dress. The stain looked like a mark, but somehow it made the necklace even more powerful. Vanessa was still standing where they had left her, holding a clipboard like it was a lifeline. Her eyes were looking toward the door, her lips slightly parted, as if she was about to speak, but nothing came out. The boutique, the fancy store, now felt colder, quieter. Not because there were fewer people, but because no one was paying attention to her anymore. The man with the navy blazer had left. The woman with the Louis Vuitton bag was now looking at a tray of rings, making sure not to make eye contact. Even the security guard had moved to the other side of the store. It was like watching a queen lose her kingdom. She still wore her crown, but no one was looking at her. Then the door opened. Keanu and Clara stepped back into the boutique, with Margot following behind them. Keanu walked calmly, with quiet confidence. Clara still wore her white dress, the one with the espresso stain. But now, the ruby around her neck made the stain seem unimportant, even beautiful. Vanessa quickly straightened up when she saw them, trying to make herself look important again. She smiled at them. "Mr. Reeves, Ms. Monroe, I just wanted to say." Margot interrupted her, his voice sharp like a knife. "No," he said, and his words hit harder than anything she could say. He stepped forward and looked directly at Vanessa. "I reviewed the security footage," he said coldly. "I heard what was said. I don't need excuses." Vanessa started to speak, but he cut her off. "You weren't just trying to help. You were trying to humiliate. You were trying to play queen in a place you don't own." The room fell completely silent. Even the music in the store stopped. Margot pulled out a small envelope, the color of heavy cream. It had gold writing on it. "Your final paycheck and termination notice," he said, handing it to her. "Effective immediately." Vanessa's hand shook as she took the envelope. She looked around the room, hoping someone would speak up for her. But no one did. "I've worked here for 7 years," Vanessa tried to say, her voice trembling. Margot's voice was firm. "Then you should have learned, in your first year, that we sell diamonds here, not entitlement." Vanessa opened her mouth to speak but closed it again. Margot turned to Keanu and Clara. "Would you like her escorted out?" he asked softly. Keanu looked at Vanessa for a long moment. "Not cruel, just honest," he said. "No. Let her walk." Vanessa turned to leave, her footsteps making hollow sounds on the floor. There was no one watching her go, except for Clara. The door closed behind Vanessa, and Clara whispered, "That stain on my dress? It'll wash out." She looked at Keanu and then at the ruby. "But what you just did, that's permanent." Keanu smiled a little. "Good," he said softly. "Because sometimes the quietest revenge is letting the world see someone for who they truly are without raising your voice." They didn't need to buy anything. No one gave them a bag or a fancy box. They simply walked out of the store, side by side. As they passed the glass cases, the jewels and watches didn't feel as warm anymore. The lights didn't shine as brightly as before. Clara still wore her dress with the coffee stain, but the ruby around her neck now made her look strong. Keanu walked with calm confidence. His hoodie was wrinkled, and his boots were worn, but no one thought he looked less important now. People moved out of their way as they passed. One of the store assistants even bowed her head. The security guard stood up straighter, almost as if ashamed. Margot followed a few steps behind them, but he didn't speak. He didn't have to. The message had already been sent. As the doors of the boutique opened, the bright sun poured in, like forgiveness. Outside, the world continued as usual. A taxi passed by. A tourist took a photo of the store. A child pointed at the window display across the street. But Keanu and Clara stepped out onto the sidewalk, hand in hand, with no crowd following them. No paparazzi. Just peace. Clara smiled at Keanu. That was? He nodded. It was. She smiled again. You didn't raise your voice once. Keanu looked at her and said, You don't have to be loud to be heard. You just have to be real. And they kept walking. Behind them, the boutique still looked perfect, but something had changed. Not in the jewels or the glass, but in the people. Vanessa was gone. Respect had come back. And more importantly, a lesson had been learned. Kindness is not about how someone looks, and dignity isn't something you can measure with money. The most valuable things are the ones you can't see, like truth, kindness, and love. Keanu didn't need to prove himself. He didn't need to argue or be loud. He simply stood by his truth, and the silence spoke for him. If you liked this story, tell me in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more fun adventures and mysteries. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.